The skies over Earth had never looked so ominous. For the first time in human history, a threat from the stars was no longer a distant dream. It was reality. Across the globe, the tension was palpable. Every eye in the world turned toward the sky, as a colossal fleet of warships from the Galactic Empire approached Earth. Their dark silhouettes filled the heavens, blocking out the sun in some places. Massive, imposing, and terrifying. These ships were far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The Earth's defenses, built up over generations, suddenly seemed insignificant in comparison. At the United Nations headquarters in New York City, the Emergency Council meeting had just begun. World leaders filled the massive conference room, their faces grim, eyes locked on the massive screen showing the Empire's fleet slowly descending toward Earth's orbit. The news was everywhere. The alien armada was here, and they had one message for humanity: surrender or face total destruction. The head of the United Nations, President Elena Markov, stood at the center of the room, her voice trembling slightly but full of resolve. We have never faced a threat like this. These ships could destroy us with a single strike. Our best scientists believe they outclass our technology by centuries. What we're dealing with is beyond comprehension. Her voice was met with a deep silence. The weight of her words hung in the air, crushing any sense of hope. Panic had begun to spread through the room, as whispers of surrender started to rise among the leaders. Some were calling for an immediate negotiation, others for a strategic retreat, but one thing was clear: fear was growing. Fear of the unknown, fear of the alien invaders who demanded Earth's unconditional surrender. On the other side of the room, General Marcus Devereux stood tall. His military uniform was crisply pressed, his expression unreadable. He had always prided himself on his ability to lead in times of crisis, but this was different. He had seen battles, fought in wars, but never had he faced an enemy like this. The idea of surrender sickened him. Earth would not kneel. "Madam President," General Devereux spoke, his voice strong and calm. "If we surrender now, we're signing our death warrant. We don't know what these invaders are capable of. But we do know this: we can't give up without a fight. The Earth will stand its ground." President Markov turned toward him, her eyes heavy with the burden of leadership. "General, are you suggesting we fight them? With what? We don't even know what weapons they have. Our best hope is to buy time until we figure out how to defend ourselves." "I'm not suggesting we fight blindly," Devereux replied, his gaze unwavering. "I'm suggesting we make a stand. We have more resources than we realize. Our best engineers and scientists have been working on secret weapons for years. Now's the time to use them." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Secret weapons. Most people had no idea what Devereux was talking about. Earth's militaries had always prepared for conventional threats, never for something like this. But the general's confidence stirred something deep within President Markov. "General, what do you propose we do?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Devereux stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room, catching the eyes of the world's leaders. "We fight back. We use our new warships. They're ready, stealth ships with advanced weaponry, enough to challenge even a fleet of this size. I'm not saying we'll win, but we will show them we're not afraid. If we give up now, humanity loses." Markov looked around the room. The leaders were divided, torn between fear and the need to protect their people. The sound of distant sirens filled the air, a reminder that the world was already on the brink of chaos. But in the midst of it, something stirred. The idea of surrender felt like a death sentence. Was humanity really going to let itself be conquered without even trying to fight back? "All right, General," Markov said, her decision made. "Prepare Earth's fleet for battle. We will not surrender, but we will need all the help we can get. I want every ally we can muster and every weapon at our disposal. Humanity will fight." The room erupted into a mix of reactions. Some leaders nodded in agreement, others whispered in fear. But Devereux stood tall, a sense of pride swelling within him. This was the moment Earth had to rise to the occasion. Outside, the world held its breath. The invaders had sent their message. Earth would either submit or face the consequences. But within the hearts of every human, a flicker of defiance was ignited. They would not go down without a fight. Not today. Not ever. As the Earth's warships began to power up and ready themselves for the battle of their lives, no one knew what the future would hold. The Galactic Empire had made its move, but humanity had made its own choice, and that choice would echo throughout the stars. The countdown to humanity's greatest battle had begun. The world held its breath as Earth's leaders made their decision. The Galactic Empire's demands echoed across every television screen, loud and clear. Surrender or face annihilation. The armada of colossal warships hovered in Earth's orbit, casting long shadows over cities below. Yet, despite the terror that gripped the planet, a single truth remained unbroken. Humans would not kneel. General Marcus Devereaux stood at the front of Earth's largest military base, overseeing the final preparations for humanity's last stand. He paced back and forth, his eyes fixed on the rows of warships that stood ready for battle. Earth's new fleet was unlike anything the universe had seen before. While the Empire's ships were massive, their designs were ancient, predictable. Earth, however, had something they did not: innovation. A fleet of sleek, agile warships equipped with cutting-edge technology, designed specifically to be the perfect counter to the Empire's overwhelming force. Devereaux knew their weapons could never match the sheer scale of the invaders' armada, but what humanity lacked in size, they would make up for in strategy. The fleet of warships was not just a defense. Each ship had a purpose, a calculated role in the upcoming battle. And at the center of it all was the most powerful warship Earth had ever built, the Vanguard. The Vanguard was a marvel of human engineering, stealthy, fast, and armed with weapons that had been kept secret for years. If humanity stood a chance, it would be because of this ship and its crew. But even with all this, Devereaux could not shake the feeling that they were facing an enemy beyond their understanding. "General, the fleet is ready for deployment." Commander Olivia Chen's voice cut through the tension. She was standing beside him, looking out at the assembled ships. "We've gathered as many allies as we could. The defense systems are fully armed, and the ships are prepared for the first strike." "Good," Devereaux muttered, though his mind was racing. "We can't afford any mistakes. The Empire's fleet is already too close. We need to make them feel the heat, hit them hard and fast. We strike first, or they'll overwhelm us before we even get a chance to react." The air was thick with urgency. Devereaux's hand hovered over a console, his fingers trembling slightly as he prepared to give the order. This was it, the moment humanity either proved its resilience or crumbled under the weight of an empire that had conquered countless worlds. "Sir, we've got a transmission from the UN," Chen said, breaking his train of thought. "It's President Markov." Devereaux nodded, then tapped a button to accept the transmission. President Markov's face appeared on the screen, her expression steely yet concerned. "General, I'm giving you full control over the fleet," she said without preamble. "The people are watching. This is our only chance. Don't fail us." Devereaux locked eyes with her through the screen. He could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. It wasn't just the world's future at stake. Humanity's survival hung in the balance. "I won't fail you, Madam President," he replied, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "We will fight, and we will win." The transmission ended, and the countdown to the most important battle in human history began. On the other side of the world, in a quiet underground command center, Sarah Lawson, a young officer, sat at the helm of the Vanguard, her heart pounding in her chest. It was hard to believe this was real. Only a few weeks ago, she had been studying theoretical tactics at a military academy. Now, she was preparing to lead the fleet of humanity's finest ships into what could very well be their final battle. As the systems powered up, the lights dimmed across the command center, leaving only the soft glow of the ship's control panels. Sarah's mind raced. She had studied the Galactic Empire, their strategies, their tactics. They were ruthless, efficient, and highly advanced. But there was one thing they didn't understand. Humans never gave up. "Captain Lawson, we're ready for launch," came a calm voice from her communications officer. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't afford to let fear take over. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. "Launch the fleet," she ordered. "We're going to show them that Earth is not going down without a fight." The Vanguard and the rest of the fleet began to rise from Earth's atmosphere, breaking through the clouds and into the cold vacuum of space. Sarah's gaze shifted to the massive armada looming ahead. The Galactic fleet was enormous, far larger than anything humanity had ever faced. But now, for the first time, the humans had the upper hand. The element of surprise was on their side. As the fleet formed up behind the Vanguard, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. The Empire had underestimated Earth. They had made a fatal mistake in thinking they could conquer a planet that had risen from nothing to achieve greatness. "Sir," the tactical officer's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're in position. The Empire's fleet is directly ahead." Sarah's fingers hovered over the controls, her mind racing. The odds were stacked against them, but she knew one thing. They couldn't lose. The Earth had to survive. For the future of their children. For the generations to come. "Prepare for the first strike," she commanded, her voice resolute. With a deep breath, she issued the order that would change the course of history. Fire. The battle for Earth had officially begun. The deep silence of space was broken only by the hum of the Vanguard's engines. Sarah Lawson sat at the helm, her fingers tightly gripping the controls as she stared at the vast void ahead. The fleet was ready, their warships forming a formidable line behind her. The tension in the command room was palpable, every officer on edge, knowing that the first strike would determine the fate of humanity. "Captain Lawson, the enemy fleet is closing in," reported Lieutenant Carter, the tactical officer. His voice betrayed none of the anxiety he must have been feeling, but Sarah could hear the slight tremor in his words. They all knew how much was riding on this. "Give the order to fire at my mark," Sarah replied, her voice calm, but her heart pounding in her chest. She'd prepared for this moment for years, but no amount of training could truly prepare her for the reality of commanding the first strike in a war that could determine the survival of Earth. Outside the ship's U-ports, the massive Galactic Empire fleet loomed large. Dozens of enormous warships, their weapons gleaming ominously under the distant stars. The power of the Empire was on full display. Yet, within the fleet of Earth's warships, there was a quiet confidence. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity had never been more unified or determined. On her console, Sarah saw the flashing red lights that indicated the enemy's weapons were fully charged. The Empire wasn't waiting to fire first. They were intent on finishing this quickly. But that didn't matter to Sarah. She knew they had the element of surprise on their side. Now, the order rang out, sharp and clear. In an instant, the Vanguard and the fleet of warships behind her unleashed a devastating barrage of energy weapons. Blue streaks of concentrated plasma shot across the vastness of space, slicing through the cold expanse toward the Galactic Empire ships. The first volley was like a storm, tearing through the silence. A dozen Empire warships erupted in violent explosions, their shields buckling under the pressure of the human weapons. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she saw the damage unfolding on the enemy's fleet. The Galactic ships were enormous, but they were not invulnerable. "They're retreating," Carter exclaimed. The Empire's fleet wasn't used to resistance. Sarah had anticipated their shock and had planned for it. The humans were not going to go down quietly. As the first strike landed, the Empire's ships hesitated, just for a moment. That was all it took. But even as the first wave of ships exploded in the void, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The Empire's might wasn't going to crumble so easily. Their ships were far more numerous, and their weapons far more powerful. The real test had only just begun. As the Vanguard and the rest of the fleet maneuvered into formation, Sarah's thoughts raced. Every decision she made could be the difference between life and death. She had to keep the initiative, never letting the Empire get a moment's peace to regroup. "Shields at 70%, Lieutenant Carter reported. His voice remained calm, but Sarah could hear the hint of urgency behind it. "We're taking fire from the left flank." "Return fire, Captain." Sarah's fingers flew over the console. The Vanguard was the pride of Earth's fleet, and she had trained with its advanced technology for years. But no ship, no matter how advanced, could hold off an entire galactic empire. They needed to stay mobile. "Deploy the decoys," Sarah commanded. The Vanguard released a series of false targets, shiny, high-tech drones designed to mimic the ship's signature. The enemy would waste precious shots on these decoys, buying them more time. The shields flickered and flared as blasts from the enemy ships hit their target, but the Vanguard held strong. This was humanity's chance to show the Empire that they were not the helpless species they assumed them to be. "We're not backing down," Sarah muttered under her breath, watching the first of the Empire's warships break apart as their weapons failed to break through the Vanguard's advanced defense systems. This was just the beginning, but humanity's resolve was unwavering. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," came a voice from the communications officer. "It's from the Empire's flagship." Sarah turned to face the screen. The face of a tall, imposing alien appeared, an officer of the Galactic Empire. His expression was one of disbelief and anger, his sharp features furrowed as he glared at her. "You dare defy the will of the Galactic Empire?" The alien spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You will pay for your arrogance, human." Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she met the alien's gaze with cold determination. "We are not going to bow to you," she replied firmly. "This is our planet, and we will fight for it." The alien's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it seemed as though the transmission would end. But instead, he spoke again, his tone colder. "Then prepare to face the full power of the Empire." The screen went black, and the transmission cut off. Sarah's heart raced, but she refused to let fear take hold. She turned to face her crew, her voice strong and resolute. "Stay sharp. They've just declared war, but we've already shown them what Earth can do. Now, we finish this." As Sarah issued the orders to launch another wave of attacks, the battle for Earth raged on. Humanity had fired the first shot, but the war was far from over. The Empire had underestimated the resilience of Earth's people, and now the price of their arrogance would be paid in full. The struggle was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than ever before. The Empire was ready for them, however. A second wave of fire came from the Imperial ships, streaking toward them with deadly precision. Explosions rang out across the human fleet, but they pressed forward, determined to reach their target. As the Vanguard closed in on the flagship, Sarah's heart pounded. They were so close now, closer than they had ever been. This was their moment to strike, to deliver a blow to the Empire that they would never forget. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted from the Empire's flagship, but it wasn't from human fire. Something else had hit it. What the hell? The fleet slowed, and Sarah saw it. The enemy flagship was no longer the focal point of the battle. A huge rift in space had appeared above the Empire's ship, and emerging from it was another fleet. But these ships weren't like the Empire's sleek warships. They were large, rough, and heavily armored. The new fleet's insignia was unfamiliar, different from anything the human forces had encountered. The atmosphere in the command center shifted instantly. "What is this?" Carter whispered, eyes wide. "Who are they?" It seemed that the fight for Earth was far from over. The new fleet, emerging from the rift, was a sight to behold. Their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, massive, jagged, and built for sheer devastation. The colors of their vessels were dark, the hulls almost black, with jagged lines of energy flickering along their surfaces, as if they were alive with power. It was clear from the moment they appeared that these ships were not like the Empire's sleek, uniform warships. They were older, rougher, and far more intimidating. The human fleet, already battered from their ongoing fight with the Empire, hesitated for a moment. They had been prepared for the Empire's retaliation, but this new force, this unknown enemy, was something entirely different. The sudden appearance of these ships sent shockwaves through the command centers of Earth's defenses. "Lieutenant Carter, what do we know about them?" Captain Lawson's voice broke through the tension in the room. Her mind was racing. What were these ships? Where had they come from? The Empire had never mentioned any alliance, any secret fleet in their communications. Carter's fingers flew over the console, scanning through every bit of information they had on the new fleet. "I'm not sure, Captain. These ships, they don't match anything in our records. There's no indication of who they are or why they've come." Sarah's thoughts whirled as she surveyed the battlefield. The Empire's fleet had faltered, momentarily distracted by this new enemy. But instead of retreating, the Empire's flagship had turned to face this new threat head-on, forming an alliance of sorts with the Dark Ships. Whatever the nature of this alliance was, it couldn't be good for humanity. "We have to act fast," Sarah said, standing tall. "We can't let the Empire regroup with these unknown forces. If they join together, Earth doesn't stand a chance." "Captain, look!" Lieutenant Harris shouted from his station. His eyes were wide, staring at the display. "The unknown fleet, it's deploying something." The human fleet watched helplessly as the new ships began releasing smaller, fast-moving crafts that zipped toward the Empire's damaged flagship. The Imperial warship, still battling against the human fleet, opened fire on the incoming ships, but the dark crafts were too quick, too agile. They dodged the Empire's shots, and in moments they latched onto the larger ship like parasites, sending a series of energy pulses into the heart of the Empire's flagship. "What are they doing?" Carter asked, his voice tinged with confusion and fear. "It's as if they're repairing it," Sarah said, her voice low. She watched in disbelief as the ships connected with the Empire's flagship and began sending bursts of energy to its hull. The damage that had been dealt to the flagship began to heal before their eyes. The once crackling shields of the massive ship shimmered and reformed. Sarah's mind raced. This was no ordinary fleet. These ships didn't just fight. They seemed to possess an almost otherworldly power, able to heal their allies. If this new force could repair the Empire's flagship in a matter of minutes, what else were they capable of? "We've got to stop them now," Sarah muttered, determination hardening her tone. "Once that flagship is repaired, it'll be too late." The Vanguard's weapons officers began targeting the smaller crafts that were attaching themselves to the flagship, but their efforts were futile. The enemy ships moved too quickly, and before long, the flagship's shields were fully restored. Suddenly, a booming transmission flooded the comms system. "This is Ambassador Exer of the Valforan Empire. You are trespassing in our space. Your resistance is futile." The voice was cold, authoritative, and full of a kind of malice that sent chills down Sarah's spine. The Valforan Empire. The name alone struck fear into her heart. Humanity had never encountered them before, but their reputation was enough to freeze the blood of anyone who had studied galactic politics. "You will fall before the might of the Valforan." Sora continued, "We have made our decision. The Galactic Empire is no longer your enemy. It is your ally. Surrender now, or face annihilation." The words struck like a hammer, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. Sarah's breath caught in her chest as the full impact of the situation began to settle in. This was no longer just a battle for survival against the Galactic Empire. Now, Earth had to face two formidable enemies, an alliance of empires who had just declared war. "This is insanity," Lieutenant Harris shouted, staring at the screen. The Empire's flagship was no longer just a damaged warship. It was practically glowing with repaired energy, its weapons fully charged and ready for combat. "Captain," Carter's voice broke through the tension. "We've got incoming. The Valforan ships are locking onto us. They're preparing to fire." Sarah didn't hesitate. She turned to the helm and gripped the controls with renewed determination. We'll have to fight them together, humanity and the Empire. We don't have a choice. As the Valforan fleet lined up for their deadly strike, Sarah knew one thing for certain. This was humanity's final stand. Earth's fate was hanging by a thread, and the next moments could either mark their downfall or their survival. With a resolute breath, she locked eyes with the crew around her. "Brace for impact," she shouted, and the ship lurched as the first volley of fire erupted from the Valforan fleet. The battle for Earth was far from over. The ship shook violently as the first waves of fire from the Valforan fleet struck their shields. The Vanguard's hull groaned under the pressure, and the sound of alarms filled every corner of the bridge. Yet Sarah Lawson stood tall, gripping the controls with unwavering determination. There was no time for hesitation. Earth's fate rested in their hands. Shields at 40% and dropping fast. Lieutenant Harris shouted, his voice tight with urgency. The view from the bridge displayed the chaotic battle unfolding outside. Humanity's warships fought bravely, but the Valforan and Empire's combined fleets were overwhelming. The enemy's fire was relentless, their ships more powerful and more numerous than they had ever anticipated. "Status on the Empire's fleet," Sarah demanded, trying to gauge the situation. She needed to know if there was any hope of an ally within the enemy's ranks. "Still engaged in battle with our forces, but..." Carter's voice trailed off as he glanced at his screen. "Their fleet's beginning to regroup, Captain. The Valforan's influence is undeniable. They've reorganized, and now it's like we're facing the unified front." "Damn it." Sarah slammed her fist against the console, the weight of the situation settling over her like a dark cloud. The once promising chances of survival were rapidly slipping away, and now humanity's very existence seemed to hang by a thread. "We need to counterattack now," she said firmly. "Divert all power to forward shields and weapon systems. Every ship we've got. We're fighting as one." The crew nodded, quickly moving into action. Sarah could feel the weight of their decision pressing down on her as she watched the screens. Earth's forces were struggling to hold their ground, but the Valforan's relentless assault was forcing them into a defensive position. The battle was growing fiercer by the second. Outside the ship, the battlefield was a nightmare of flashing lights and energy blasts. Humanity's warships moved in tight formations, evading the incoming fire from the Valforan fleet. But their agility was not enough to match the sheer destructive force of the enemy's weapons. It was clear that they were not just fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to come up with a strategy, something to tip the balance in humanity's favor. But the more she thought, the more impossible it seemed. How could they hope to defeat two galactic empires at once? "Captain," Carter's voice jolted her out of her thoughts. "The Empire's flagship. It's coming right at us." She turned just in time to see the Galactica, the massive Imperial warship, advancing toward them. Its once damaged hull was now fully repaired, gleaming with deadly intent. The flagship fired its main cannon, a blinding beam of energy that sliced through space toward the Vanguard. "Brace for impact," Sarah shouted, diving toward the controls as the ship lurched under the force of the blast. The shields flared, holding for just a moment before the blast shattered them completely. "Shields down," Harris yelled as the Vanguard rocked violently. Hull integrity at 60% and falling. Sarah gritted her teeth, her knuckles white, as she gripped the control panel. There was no time left for second guesses. She had to act now or face certain destruction. "Launch all remaining fighters," she ordered. "Full power to the rear shields and divert all energy to the engines. We need speed." The order was executed immediately, and the Vanguard shot forward, narrowly avoiding another blast from the Imperial flagship. But their relief was short-lived. The Valforan fleet, still in pursuit, began closing in from all sides, tightening the noose around humanity's last hope. "Captain," Carter said, his voice laced with fear, "we're surrounded." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she studied the situation. They were running out of options. Earth's last line of defense was crumbling before their eyes. Then a thought hit her, a risky plan, one that could either save them all or ensure their complete annihilation. If she could somehow disable the Valforan's flagship, they might stand a chance. But the enemy was not giving them a moment's reprieve. Every second counted, and they had to act fast. Lieutenant Harris, prepare a full impulse strike on the Valforan flagship, she ordered, her voice sharp with resolve. We're going all in. Target their primary energy core. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but Sarah's confidence cut through the doubt. They had no choice but to try. On it, Captain, Harris responded, his hands flying over the control panel. Charging weapons now. The seconds stretched on as Sarah watched the screens. The Vanguard was a sitting duck without its shields, and the Valforan fleet was moving in for the kill. But this was their only chance. Now, Sarah commanded. The Vanguard's weapons fired in unison, a volley of concentrated energy blasts aimed at the heart of the Valforan flagship. The first few strikes hit, but they barely made a dent. The flagship's shields absorbed the energy with ease. Then, something changed. There was a shift in the Valforan fleet's formation, a slight hesitation. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Lieutenant Carter, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Their shields are down. Keep firing. The crew erupted into action as the remaining power in their weapon systems surged toward the flagship's exposed core. Each blast grew more powerful, more focused, and finally, with one last, thunderous explosion, the flagship's core ruptured. The flagship's massive form shuddered, then exploded in a burst of light that illuminated the entire battlefield. The explosion sent shockwaves through space, creating a momentary lull in the chaos around them. The Valforan fleet hesitated. For the first time since the battle began, they seemed uncertain. The sudden loss of their flagship was a devastating blow. But Sarah knew that the fight wasn't over. The warships of the Galactic Empire and the Valforan fleet were still looming, ready to strike again. This was just a brief pause before the next wave of destruction. Humanity's fight for survival had just begun. Signal the fleet, she ordered, standing up straight. Tell them to converge on the Empire's central command vessel. We're ending this war now. The Vanguard turned once again, its guns blazing as the last offensive began. The remaining Earth warships rallied around them, pushing forward with all the might they could muster. It was a final, all-out assault, an assault that would determine the fate of humanity. The Empire's fleet moved in for one last clash. The final battle was upon them. The crew of the Vanguard fought with everything they had, their hearts filled with determination. This was their last stand, and they would fight until the last ship fell. Humanity's future depended on it. The war was almost over.